Dr. Kelly Kapic works at Covenant College and has also written this amazing book, You're Only Human. Kelly's going to take over and we are going to share some questions with Kelly. So thank you for joining us. We're so glad that you're here.
Thanks, Janet. It is actually fun to be doing this with Tabitha. It'll be with fear and trepidation that I allow her to hand over time for questions and discussion in a bit. But I just wanted to kind of start by saying thank you very much. As some of you are old friends, some of you are newer friends, many of you know I'm not on social media. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. So I have this incredible challenge of how do you share about your work when you don't have those resources. So I'm dependent on others to help with that. So I really appreciate those of you who've been willing to kind of dive into this book early and consider writing reviews and starring it and all of those kind of things. And that means a ton to me. So I'm super thankful and couldn't kind of launch this out without you. So thank you very much. But with some trepidation, this is my wife, Tabitha. And so we'll see where we go under her lead.
Hi. Hi. I hope that I know all of you. I can't see who everyone is, but we are so thankful that you've joined us. I get to do things on Zoom a lot, but not necessarily with my husband. So this is really fun. Just before we get started, Kelly and I have been married forever, since 1993. We went to high school together. So we have many decades under our belts together. So it's a real pleasure to do this with him. So we're going to dive in. This is exciting. This is book number 17 for Kelly. And I think it's always, he jokes that it's like he's never been pregnant, but he imagines. It's kind of like incubating a baby. And then today is the official release date. So hopefully, if you don't already have this book in your hands, hopefully FedEx or UPS or someone is getting it to you today. So I just wanted to start out just with a behind the scenes background and ask Kelly. He knows maybe a little bit of what I might ask, but I'm not going to let him know everything. So hopefully we'll get a few surprise answers. All right, Kelly. So the first thing I want to ask you is to explain a little bit about your process as a writer. So you have an idea, I want to write a book about whatever. What process do you then go through? What steps?
Yeah, I mean, you've been living with this for a long time. It is interesting. I mean, this is a topic we've been thinking about and talking about for at least 20 years. And so there's some length to it, but there's also, in terms of a process, authors do it in different ways. And the best way I've kind of figured out how to describe how it feels to me is like with this book, it was like I was given, literally, 5,000 puzzle pieces. And then without a picture, and I was told within these 5,000 pieces, there's a 300 piece puzzle that goes together. Now find it, right? And so that's what I've been spending years doing. And thankfully, because of a grant, I had more time, but it really does kind of feel like trying to put things together. And part of what I've tried to do is make sure I'm reading in different areas, not just theology, but psychology and history and those kind of things. And so doing it over a long period of time allows me to draw on some of those things with the different questions that I explore.
Okay, I like that. I don't know that I've ever heard you use the puzzle piece metaphor, but I really like that. 5,000 pieces to 300.
That's how I feel. That's why I'm depressed all the time, honey.
Yeah, I say that every theologian's soul looks like a basset hound. That's the inside every theologian is a.
But it's like I take a week or two staring at a piece and I keep trying, and then 2 weeks are gone and you're like, that piece didn't work there. So
something I've noticed you do also in the background when you're preparing for a book is you, at least more in recent years, you have a list of people that you call. And what are you looking for in those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, some of that is kind of even growing out of some of the research, but also the spiritual formation that's been happening to me through working on this book. Is I'm looking for people whose opinions I trust in areas where I don't have the same background and knowledge. And so I'll throw out ideas and say, here's what I'm thinking. Does this sound crazy? Help expose me to authors and ideas and critique. And it's just been super helpful. I've really benefited by talking with people who specialize in liturgy or in psychology or, other areas that has been tremendous to me.
How come you don't call me?
Every day, honey. Every day I seek your advice.
Okay. Never have you done an interview where you use the word honey as much as you're going to use it
Did
today.
I use that? I'm sorry. It just came out.
No, it's fine. I mean, that's part of why we're doing this, right? Okay, so that's kind of your process, the 5,000 pieces to 300. But if I was good at math, let's see, that's that Kelly and I are not number people, we're word people. 4,700 pieces that don't make the final cut. So I don't know. I have two questions. How do you decide what to cut? And follow up, what's something that you left out of this book that was like right on the edge?
Yeah. It's the cutting is the brutal part, because they do become your babies and you don't want to cut them out. And for me, again, I rely on some other people. I have this dear friend who doesn't live here. He has a PhD and he's basically retired, but I have him and I really trust him. He's a brutal editor. And so I use that a lot to cut, or just, and sometimes it's things I'll tell you one thing I cut. For example, I had a chapter that the very first words of the chapter were, God didn't create a perfect world, but he did create a good one. But then I thought, I'm going to have to I loved it because actually I think it's theological. He didn't create a perfect world, but you have to understand what perfect means theologically. And so it's provocative and fun. And then I thought, I don't know, I'll lose readers immediately because I think I'm saying God did something bad. So that got cut. The kind of something you and I have talked about that I ended up cutting, and I spent a month really 8 hours a day focused on researching kind of Enneagram stuff and personality differences. Maybe it was more like 6 weeks. And I had written a bunch and I'm super interested in that, but I ended up cutting almost all of that out. It's really interesting in terms of trying to think through some of the positives, some of the warnings, but it relates to finitude in terms of our particularity. And so I was interested in that, but it started to just become too much.
And I think you would have gotten in trouble with that one because a lot of people in our circles are really into the Enneagram right now.
I think I would have.
I mean,
I think in some ways I was going to say some positive things, but also raise some concerns. So I probably would have been in trouble by everybody because I both think it's helpful and problematic. So there you go.
Why would you poke the tiger at that point? Just leave that out. Fun. So we could do like a director's cut of You're Only Human. That's like 5 times as thick.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. Let's be honest.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. Enough. Okay, I want to remind folks who've joined us online that you can click on the Q&A and type in a question if there's something you want to ask Kelly. Dr. Kapic, yes, I call him doctor at home. Another question I have for you is how do you describe the process of writing? What does it mean to you? And how has it changed over years? From your first was your dissertation, your PhD dissertation, all the way up to number 17. So how do you describe writing, the process of it for you? And what do you think has changed?
Yeah, for me, the process of writing is psychological warfare. It is because sometimes, I've said before, I'll read something that I've written in the morning and think that's genuinely helpful and strong and clear and good. And then I'll read the same thing at 3 p.m. I think that is crap. It's not worth the paper it's on. So trying to learn to not totally trust either of those and keep going. And I've really learned that writing is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And the value of editing and revision and revision and revision. And I get a lot of people that I trust, including you. You're always my final editor and it's terrifying, but you always make such great edits and revisions for me. But I do think I think of writing as a communal sport too. But it can be
Yeah.
kind of lonely and difficult. So that's why a day like today is super fun, because at least I know other people write books super quick, and I think people think I do, but I've been working on this book for years. And so this feels like a big deal to finally have it out.
Yeah, it's really fun. I have edited your stuff throughout the years, and all your best ideas you stole from me.
That's right.
And I
Yeah.
think I just want to put it out there so that people know.
Fair enough. I'm not going to disagree.
Okay, and so I like that in terms of how your view of writing has changed over time, is being communal and really
Just for the people, just cross out my name, right? Just put Tabitha right there.
Yeah.
That would be good.
accuracy in
Yeah.
Journalism.
Truth in journalism.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So it's changed because I mean you've read books on writing too, not a lot, but I always love the little snippets you come out with. Like you were just reading that Stephen King book on writing. What sparked for you in that?
Yeah, I mean, part of what I liked about what he was talking about, I looked at that book a long time ago and picked it up recently and read it again. And here was a surprise for me. I've been doing this over 20 years. And honestly, it was only reading that again that I thought, I never think of myself as a creative. But even though I write nonfiction, I am a creative. And so a lot of what he was talking about as a fiction author actually really resonated with me. Some of the challenges, some of the delights, some of the complexities. And so I tend to revere creatives, and I think of them as artists, painters and novelists and, architects. So that was meaningful, and also meant that I could then draw on some of their wisdom to try and navigate some things that was helpful.
Yeah, that's kind of a new one for me to say that you're a creative.
Yeah, you don't believe it.
No, I do. Hey. Okay, I'm getting some other questions in. So one is, were in the writing of this book in particular, were you influenced on this topic by your college students that you've taught for 21 years at Covenant College?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I mean, my students are a huge shaping force in the whole book, and they do show up. There's probably some people who are on this call right now who have Covenant connections or were former students. And here's a fun game: is read the book and try and identify all the Covenant voices. Some faculty, some alum, many are named, some are not. So see if you can identify them all, because it's actually quite a bit. But yeah, no, students, all the lunches with students, all the time with them in and out of class. There's even the way the book is structured. It's actually, those who haven't seen it yet, but it's structured along questions, and the students have deeply shaped that. I think the reason this book got shaped in terms of questions as an organizing principle is because my students, they've really helped me in those ways, and they ask great questions.
Yeah, they are pretty great. Actually, our son, who the book is dedicated to, is a freshman at Covenant, and our daughter Margot is quoted in the book. True. I always like to have visual aids, Kelly. I like that. Okay, I know from the inside that you are a very gracious person to others. You have this reputation of being someone who pours out grace on others. But I also know behind the scenes that you might be least or less gracious with yourself.
I knew that's where we're going.
And I wonder what You're Only Human, like, have you been able to internalize some of this yourself, in terms of appropriate self-compassion, or even maybe seeing yourself the way God sees you, with a lot of compassion?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's obviously a question from someone who knows me. Yeah, really, even this week I've found I've been having to revisit things that I wrote in there and that I thought about, and because obviously I am so driven by productivity and efficiency. And one of the arguments I make in the book is productivity and efficiency are kind of the enemies of love often. So, and I'm definitely, if the book works, part of the reason it might work is because this stuff isn't hypothetical to me. It's I'm living it. And so, definitely this book is the most personal. This book and Embodied Hope are the most personal. And in Embodied Hope, we share a little bit of our story up front, but then really we tried not to just make it biographical throughout. But this book does have personal stories throughout. And it is more one of the, as I turned 50 this year, one of the things that has also surprised me about myself is I've finally become more comfortable saying I at times and owning ideas and voicing vulnerabilities and those kind of things. So yeah, it is stuff. There's a chapter there on, do I have enough time? And the answer allowed me to kind of explore the idea of presence with God and presence with others. And even this last week, because of preparation for the book release and everything, it's been pretty frenetic, and I have found myself struggling afresh. I can tell when I'm struggling to be present. And so it has been good for me to circle back and try and remind myself of these truths. So yeah, it's definitely not anything I've aced, something I'm still living with.
Yeah, I mean, we are both really into constantly renovating our time management. It's just kind of a thing that we do. I'm sure kids just love it. But I think we've realized how limited a view that is. It's not just about eking more out of the day. So that's really powerful for me to, you've said often that you don't know exactly what you think of something till you write it. And I love now just being in the stage of life with you that you're getting to tackle these things and say, okay, here's what I think about it. So yeah,
honestly, that's exactly right. I think that's why, with your encouragement, both writing the Suffering book and writing this book, I had a lot of instincts and I had a lot of thoughts, but being forced to really work through it has been hugely helpful. Yeah. Now I know what I think about it.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about how it affects you personally or us personally, but now I want you to think about when if this book goes out there now and has the impact you hope and dream it would have, what would look different in the church, for instance? Or what would look different for Christians or folks who read this book?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think what it would look different in the church is that in the average church right now, 15 to 20% of the people do almost all of the work, 80% of the work, and which perpetuates this problem. So in an ideal world, it would affect the church, because what would happen is 60% of the people would do the majority of the work. And that would make everybody healthier, because it would help people. Right now, the options are either I do everything or I do nothing. And that's, it would look healthier, because pastors would not just learn that they can be vulnerable and confess certain sins, but actually, I think our first step is for pastors to become more comfortable with their finitude. I think when they are able to both verbally and in their life be comfortable saying no and that kind of thing, I think it helps all of us. I think, learning to have rhythms in our days and our weeks could be good. I mean, one of the great things for me is when you say, hey, you're done for the day, go watch ESPN, like, stop, you're doing too much. And that's okay. And that can be a spiritual exercise.
After you get me a cup of coffee, though. Can you get me a coffee and then go sit down?
Yeah.
That's true. ESPN, if you want to know his guilty pleasures, it's ESPN and sort of like espionage books. What would you call, like, international thrillers?
Yeah, something like that.
Like Clear and Present Danger and all that. Those are his guilty pleasures. And he likes cookies.
Yeah, you gotta have some kind of cookie with coffee.
It's just a dessert. He would love it if his lunch had a little dessert in it.
Well, it does now. I just bring it to the office.
I love that so much. Okay. Yeah, what you said about giving each other permission, I would love for this book to go out in the world and have congregants look at their pastors and say, you need rest. There's plenty of studies that we've seen, Kelly, where if you have a congregant, just a church goer, mark off all the things they think their pastor should be doing in a given week. And this is, I think my pastor should do all this. When you add it up, it's like 120 hours a week of work.
Yeah.
And we're not giving our pastors time to pray or be. And so they're constantly deficit spending from inside themselves. And we don't want leadership, to be deficit spending, because bad things are going to happen. Yeah. So I love that focus of, if this has the impact that you hope and dream, you hope God does with it, that there would be more creaturely beingness instead of this. Let's push past our limits. That's pretty popular, right? I mean, did you feel that tension of, there's a lot of New York Times bestsellers of being, I don't want to say any names of books because I feel like I don't want to be offensive, but.
Well, yeah, just yesterday I was on a radio interview, and during one of the breaks, you could hear they announced what, in the next hour, there was going to be a 15-minute interview with an author of a different book. And their book was something like the 7-minute productivity day or something like that. It was all about, in 7 minutes, you can change your life and be more productive. And I thought, these are very different visions, and I'm about learning time management and all of that, but this is, I think we've got a theological problem, not a time management problem. So it is very countercultural, which at its best, I do think, I think it's been encouraging to see how many people, when they've read it, have said, this is a breath of fresh air. This is like I've come up from water. I've heard these various versions of that again and again, actually, from early readers. And that's been really encouraging, because as one person said, it was a paradigm shift for them. And so in an ideal world, it really would be a paradigm shift in a healthier way. And that another thing is that I hope as Christians, we could learn to talk about our finitude and not just about sin. That's a big part for me. And especially because I'm a Reformed theologian, I believe in sin. I think it's really bad, worse than most people think. And yet I think we're so focused on sin that has distorted what it means to be a good creature. And so we deal with so much. And with students, I see a lot of the psychological challenges that come along with that. So.
Yeah, for years before this book, before you were even writing it, you would say to me, when I was beating myself up about not getting my whole list done, my always impossible list, you would say this mantra to me: finitude is not sin. Because in our culture, in America at least, the culture we're most familiar with, this idea of you're a human doing and not a human being, and that if you can't do all the things, you're committing sins of omission. Right. I'm not doing that, so I'm bad. And this idea of, well, you probably just need to sleep because you're a creature. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
And along that line, a question that was submitted, if perfectionism is defined as the overwhelming sense that it is never enough, you are never enough, is this book a cure for perfectionism?
Yeah, that is a great question. And it's funny, part of the research on this book, I did end up reading a lot on perfectionism. And I remember reading one author, and she said, we treat perfectionism like it's just kind of a, haha, I'm a perfectionist. She's like, this is serious, and it can actually be deadly. And it really sobered me, like, yeah, this really can cripple people and families and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's interesting. There's this, probably most people on this have heard this phrase, you are enough. And we try and comfort one another with that. And I like that saying. But because I'm a theologian, I'm not very poetic, and I have a little bit of an issue with it, because what I would just say is, you're not enough. And that's the very reason you are enough, because you were never made to be enough. You were never made to do all these things and to be all of these things. And so The fact that you're not enough is why you're enough. And I think one of the challenges with perfectionism, what's built into it is, as I've thought about it, is kind of, on the one hand, it undervalues process. This is part of what I was trying to get at when I said God didn't create a perfect world. He made a good one. God's always been comfortable with process. He's taking things somewhere. That's always, there's day one and then there's day two. And perfection means full or complete. And so the struggle is we want the whole thing now rather than growing comfortable with the process. And then the second challenge I think of with perfectionism is really a struggle with the good of dependency. Even culturally, the word dependent is very negative. And I'm fully aware of the dangers of codependency and those kind of challenges. But biblically, God made us before there was sin and fall to be dependent on him, on others, upon the earth. And I think, again, that's a struggle for perfectionism, because when we're trying to be perfect, we think we should be able to do it all on our own. And it's weakness to depend on others.
I love that. The idea of process, not valuing process. And as you said many times, God created the world through a process, and he saved his people through, if you look at the whole Old Testament, New Testament, through process and time. And then the part about community. For 20 years, Kelly and I have taken different cohorts of young marrieds through a year of delving into their marriage. And one of the things that we said is that this picture where you have just the couple like on a cliff at the Grand Canyon, versus you take a picture from the roof of the church and the couple is surrounded by all the people that love them, that's a more full view of marriage. And just being in community is a fuller view of self. So I love that, because it's not just do less. It's no, recognize the truth that God values process and he put you in community. I'm going to do one more question for you. And if some of you, we were going to go to 12:30, if you can stay, great. If not, there'll be a recording, but this is from a participant. Other than looking forward from creation to the incarnation, are there other ways that our limits are part of us being made in the image of an unlimited God? That's a great one, Becca. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that is a great question. Part of what's fascinating about the whole thing is how, as humans, we're made in God's image, and Christ is the image. And whoever asked that, I think they are right to immediately turn to the incarnation, because I do think that's really, really the answer. And I guess I'd want to ask more about what they mean by that. Are there other ways? Because there's both a mirroring and there's both a similarity and a dissimilarity between us and God, right? And so it's interesting. For example, in the ancient Eastern Church, when they would talk about God, they would spend their time talking about what God is not. And that's where things like infinite come from. He's not finite, right? He's he knows all things. It's all these things. He is not bound by a body. And often what they're saying is he's greater than these things. And so and
I wonder what, as we look at the incarnation and the continual fact that Christ has a body, that Christ is human.
Yeah.
Still, I mean, how does that fit into how we view our own flesh?
Yeah, I mean, again, in Orthodoxy, it's not just that it matters that we believe he physically rose from the grave, but a super interesting theological question is, where is Jesus right now? And like serious academics and scholarship still wrestle through this, because it's actually a really complicated question. But I'm with mainline Orthodoxy from Augustine to Calvin. You can debate how you do this, but his ongoing humanity, including his physicality, matters. And that idea that he ever lives to make intercession for us is about his ongoing humanity. And so that's still looking to the incarnation, but to the glorified incarnation, which is God's great yes to humanity, his great yes to his creation, that he's not embarrassed by the earthiness of it all. That was always his plan.
I love that. And I love the idea that it's also a yes to process in community. I think about the glorified body of Christ as still bearing the wounds of crucifixion. And that just gives me hope for the future, that it's not that all the limitations and brokenness in the world just disappear. It's they're somehow become a glorious part of what we've walked through.
Yeah.
Okay, final thing. Kelly Kapic.
Uh-oh.
Why is finitude good news?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the reason finitude is good news is because it's a path of love. We were made to be in a relationship with God, neighbor, and the earth. And only when we embrace our finitude can we see our dependence on God, neighbor, and earth as good. And that then slows us down to appreciate those relationships, to invest in them, and to realize that is not a waste. That's what this whole thing is about. So the short answer is love. Because we're creatures and we're never going to cease being creatures for eternity. And so that means being a creature is good. God likes what he made. He doesn't like the sin that perverts and distorts being human or being a creature. So Augustine said, God has the ability to love what he made, which is us, and to hate what we made, which is our sin. And so he's going to, he's going to take care of that. But the short answer is love. I think to love well, we have to embrace the fact that we're creatures and love as creatures rather than something else.
I love that. And as you know, in addition to our two teenagers, we have a big fluffy dog that I think is very good at being a creature and existing in love. And I hope that the way I see her and the way she sees me somehow reflects my relationship with Christ as well. I want to say thanks to Janet for kicking us off and helping us. I want to say thank you to all of you who pre-ordered the book and reviewed it. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you to my wonderful husband. Thank you for being faithful with your gifts over all these years. Thank
you for doing this. That was great.
You're my best friend, buddy.
Oh, you too.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We're so happy that you were able to join us.